For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means.
Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Tonight's featured show is Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Welcome to the Republic News Network for our live national broadcast. The RNN, which stands for the Republic News Network, has been doing this radio show since 2010, and it's always been a friendly introduction for the people of the United States Corporation. Here we go. It's true. The United States is a federal corporation, and their exclusive jurisdiction is in the District of Columbia. The Republic government was simply a bunch of U.S. citizens that in law don't have access to the Bill of Rights, and they realized they wanted to be Americans as our founders and our law provided each and every one of us. See, we've been hard at work since 2008, and since 2010, we have successfully re-inhabited the original government vacated under Lincoln in 1861. I know, it's hard to understand. Don't worry. We are law-abiding, peaceful Americans and very pro-government, and we love our country. You can consider the Republic members are tired of the corruption that we see every day. See, we found in the law that there is two forms of government here on the land, and we did something about it. We are people. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. We have families just like you. We simply found some truths, and now we're sharing these important truths with the rest of the world. So get ready to hear things that sound amazing, and get ready to understand that you too are about to be a part of history. We welcome each one of you to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel and your Republic, if you so choose.
Indie Rock 101 Nashville. We're getting ready for the Christmas prayer and message for freedom, going to our great President-elect, Donald Trump. So everybody stay tuned and get ready, because here we go. This is what it's all about, folks, coming together for our country. So stay tuned.
Good evening, this is Bob Barnett, and I am pleased to give a little bit of information at the front end of this call so that we can continue through a tremendous learning experience tonight. What actually happened is the Republic got re-inhabited in 2010, and all that means is that a claim and interest was made for all the people, and for all the people, the playing field is open. You try and look at this as if it's a football field, a soccer field. This is where we can play towards the solution. And what I mean by that is it's everybody's field. You all are part of it. You all have a right to it. It's yours. This is not a club. This is not some corporate organization. This is not a private, over here, special place for just certain people. This is the Republic, the original Republic, that was formed by those 56 men and initiated by the Declaration of Independence, that followed a tumultuous time and ultimately became the United States. The real Republican form of government that we have the right to, that we have every right to express. We have in 1787 a constitution that limited government but was missing some certain important things that in 1789 became, and then in 1791, the icing on the cake, the Bill of Rights was added. The Bill of Rights has a First Amendment, and it's under that First Amendment that we have every right, that's every one of us, to be here, to stand here, and to make known why we're here. So between the Declaration of Independence that created that playing field, because that's our unalienable rights, that
Amen.
we have these rights to speak, to create, to inform, to recover, to become again the original republic. And to that end, we thank God because we have just had a massive extension by the election of this man in the corporate entity, United States, who's buying us the time to get this done. And we are pleased tonight to have a fine group of people who are hosted by Dan Happel, who does Connecting the Dots every single week, is programmed every single week, every Thursday night, and he's here tonight with some tremendously capable and knowledgeable people to help teach us why we can do all this. And with that, I'll yield to Dan Happel, your host, Connecting the Dots.
Thank you, Bob. This program, Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, has been on the air now for about 9 months. And in that time, we have had quite a large number of guests on the program. Tonight, we are going to be hearing from some of those guests, and they've agreed to come on our program tonight to really to talk directly to President Trump and let him know what they feel are the most important issues facing our country today and how they feel that he could best address those issues. I'll just very briefly set the rules for the discussion. Each guest will have 5 minutes to give their point of view and to talk to the president, and with 15 minutes before their expired time, I will let them know by just saying 15 seconds, and that means they've got 15 seconds to wrap up. We're going to have a tight schedule tonight just because we've got a lot of guests and a lot to do. So with that, I will introduce our first guest for this evening. Harriet Hagman is an attorney, a constitutional attorney from Cheyenne, Wyoming. She deals very specifically in property rights. I met Harriet last year at the American Lands Council meeting in Salt Lake City, and she was one of the keynote speakers for that program. And Harriet, I welcome you to the program and ask you to please address President-elect Trump.
Thank you, Dan. To President-elect Trump, the Competitive Enterprise Institute estimates that American consumers and the U.S. economy were saddled with a $2 trillion hidden tax in 2015 through the implementation of federal regulations. If the U.S. federal regulatory scheme were a country, it would be the world's 10th largest economy, ranking behind Russia and ahead of India. This is a cost of almost $15,000 in additional costs per household. These costs affect businesses' prices, workers' wages, and growth. Our economy has been stagnant for the last 8 years, and much of the problem lies in the fact that we are not only overly regulated, but the fact that we have created a government employee business model that encourages delay, increases the cost of doing business, incentivizes agencies to interpret all statutes in the most draconian way possible, and rewards those agencies who use penalties as a way of padding their own coffers. As a water and natural resources attorney, I will give you just one example from the Corps of Engineers and the EPA's interpretation and enforcement of the Clean Water Act. The average applicant spends 788 days and $271,596 to obtain a 404 permit, often in relation to work that is to be done on their own private property. These agencies have every incentive to delay issuance of any such permit and to increase the cost for doing so, as those costs are paid to the agencies to do the work, thereby ensuring job security for federal employees. The costs for such a permit, in other words, are not expended to protect the environment, but to protect the federal bureaucracies. Agencies are self-funding, thereby becoming even less accountable to Congress and to the American people. This approach to regulating the American economy is not only costly, but clearly unconstitutional. The United States is a republic, a representative form of government. It is based upon the unique ideal that the government works for its citizens and not the other way around. The government exists only for the purpose of securing our God-given rights, not for dictating every possible aspect of our existence. The current regulatory regime in this country is entirely contrary to that ideal. In 2015, Congress passed 114 new laws. During that same year, the federal regulatory agencies issued and implemented 3,410 new regulations. That is 30 rules for every law that was enacted. While our elected representatives are, or at least should be, accountable to us, the voters, and must answer for their actions, the same cannot be said of the nameless, faceless bureaucrats that are issuing and enforcing these regulations. They are not accountable to anyone. They simply cannot be fired for destroying jobs, taking private property, persecuting irrigators, or defiling the environment, as was the case when the EPA dumped 3 million gallons of toxic sludge into the Animas River in southwestern Colorado last year. No one is ever held accountable when a federal employee wreaks havoc. You need look no further than the VA scandal and the travesty of our national forests going up in smoke to understand that fact. So what must be done? There must be an immediate moratorium placed on any new regulations. Congress must exercise its authority under the Congressional Review Act of 1996, thereby passing a joint resolution of disapproval in order to stop as many of the Obama agency rules as possible. We must reverse the top-down approach that has been in high gear for the last 8 years. Congress and you, Mr. President, must work diligently and assiduously to return power to the states where it belongs. The fact is that a government that is closest to its people is not only more responsive and more accountable, but it is much more effective. Concentrating power in Washington, D.C. does not work, has not worked, and will not work. Tax reform is critical. The majority of the taxing authority must reside with the states. We must require congressional approval for any regulation that will have an economic impact in excess of, say, $25 million, $30 million, whatever the number may be. But Congress is the one that should be passing and passing our laws, not agencies in the executive branch. In summary, Mr. President, our forefathers fought the war of independence over taxation without representation. We now find ourselves fighting a battle of regulation without representation. This approach is wrong-headed in the extreme and must be stopped. I would welcome the opportunity to work with you and your administration to turn this situation around and to return the power to the citizens of this great country. Thank you.
Wow, that was perfect. Harry, you were 1 second short. Our next guest on the call-in is Mr. Tom DeWeese. Tom is a staunch supporter of the anti-Agenda 21 movement in the country. He is the founder and chairman of the American Policy Center. And, Tom, you are really a standout in the area of tackling sustainable development initiatives and all the things that Agenda 21 stand for. I would like to welcome Mr. Tom DeWeese to our call. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Dan. Mr. President, I want to confirm for you that there really is a drive for global governance working for the destruction of American sovereignty and independence. Their agenda is hidden under many names like sustainable development, smart growth, walkable cities, and visioning. It's run by the very same people who worked so hard to derail your election because you scared them to death. They fully understand that if you succeed, their goals of global governance are finished. You have declared your intention to make our nation the focal point. You have made it your goal to see individual Americans free to live their own lives and pursue their own dreams. To assure that happens, you must use your historic victory to restore the Republic by taking two major steps in your presidency. One, assure the complete protection of private property rights for every American. Two, immediately begin the process of reining in the power, overreach, and illegal policies of several federal agencies, in particular the Agency of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. If you want to work to end poverty and help restore American wealth, then private property ownership is the single most effective way to do it. It is the only tool the poor have to build their own personal wealth. Welfare and government programs will not do it. Right now, HUD is using a program called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, or AFFH, to destroy the property rights and property values of the middle class in communities across the nation. If during this campaign, you promised to end this program, do it. HUD is using the program for pure social engineering to change the very culture of the nation and destroy the concept of property ownership. And AFFH is destroying the founders' concept of local rule in our communities by taking away every community's freedom of self-determination. All of this will only lead to growing poverty and massive central government control. It must be stopped. Here are a few immediate steps that your administration can take to stop this assault on property owners and local communities. First, stop the grants. HUD and other agencies dangle federal money in front of local communities as a trap to force them to impose the HUD policies. These grants come with specific strings attached that make the community spend more money and create more rules and regulations. Second, stop the drive for the establishment of regional, non-elected governments. They force on communities a one-size-fits-all approach and take government further from the people. Only the representatives chosen by the people should make policy for their communities. Third, work with Congress to write specific legislation that limits the agency's ability to create regulations beyond the intended scope of the programs. This failure in the past has allowed the bureaucracy to impose hundreds of thousands of rules and regulations that help to destroy the economy while building their own power with their own agency. And fourth, encourage whistleblowers to report on bad policy inside their own agencies. Who knows the situation better? Allow them to speak. And fifth, cut the HUD budget to a point that it can only conduct the programs intended, thereby stopping its overreach. Mr. President, take these actions to protect private property and local rule, and it will be enough to make America great again. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That was terrific. I would ask, too, we're all on this call, and any of our other guests that are on the call that are not actually speaking, if they would mute their phones, because we are getting a little bit of background noise. So if they would please do that. Our next guest on the program is Mindy Patterson. I met Mindy at the National Republican Convention in Cleveland. Mindy is the founder and the chief executive officer of a group called the Cavalry Group, and she is very involved in protecting the rights of animal owners and ranchers and farmers and so forth, and has been spearheading the effort to end the radical animal rights groups' chokehold over our country. Mindy, I welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much. President-elect Trump
For centuries, those who raise, breed, and work with animals have been revered and lauded for what they do. But today, across America, our rights to own and raise animals are under attack by animal rights activists and their increased influence on government and non-government agencies overseeing issues pertaining to animal welfare. This onslaught regularly violates protection from illegal search and seizure and a citizen's right to due process of the law, all of which are outlined specifically in the U.S. Constitution. The rule of law provides that Americans are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law based upon facts and evidence, not emotion and conjecture. Unfortunately for animal owners today, the opposite is prevalent. Animal rights activists use false claims of animal abuse and anonymous tip lines to convince overzealous prosecutors and sympathetic judges to issue warrants when, in most cases, no facts or actual witnessed evidence is provided to obtain the warrant. As a result, animal owners and animal-related businesses live in the daily terror that fraudulent claims, anonymous tips, or animal rights activists' internet campaigns could result in law enforcement arriving at their door and their animals illegally seized without due process. Coupled with this fear, animal owners are then exposed to extravagant animal care bonds and charges for temporary animal care, possible sterilization of high-value breeding stock, or euthanization of their animals. My company, the Cavalry Group, works daily to protect and preserve the constitutional rights of our members who raise, breed, and work with animals in animal agriculture, pet industries, animals in service, and entertainment. And we have had a front row seat to witness that the enemy working to destroy our members' freedom to raise, breed, and work with animals is the common enemy that wishes to destroy America's fundamental constitutional principle of private property. So whether it's an animal rights activist or an environmental extremist or even someone pushing Common Core or socialized medicine like Obamacare, we have to get back into our schools and re-educate our teachers and our youth about America's founding and what makes America exceptional. And that liberty applies to everyone, not just the certain causes that we feel strongly about. As American constitutional advocates, we need to focus on our young people who have had the founding of America stripped from our educational system, which has been replaced with socialistic, even communistic views, and their revisionist versions of their American history and their American civics. So instead of celebrating ownership of private property, independence, and self-reliance and all the qualities that have made America the great country that it is, our youth have been tricked into believing that it's about the collective. By laying the groundwork in our youth about our founding principles, it will help future leaders and policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels to better identify any counterfeits, as I call them, of anti-American policies which often masquerade as do-gooder solutions that they may use to satisfy their social engineering objectives. In other words, if we get back to teaching and training our youth the truth about America, they will be better equipped to recognize what is un-American and reject it immediately. Whether non-governmental agencies or government agencies abuse their power to attack American citizens' natural resources such as energy, water, land rights, or even their animal enterprise, it's all of the same fight. It's about private property. It's about our Constitution. And it's often by radicals masquerading as the savior of the day who actually are engaged in taking away our rights to private property. We need to realize that we have all got to work together in different arenas to fight the common enemy. These past 8 years we have all been fighting the very despotism and tyranny that prompted the founding of America. And it is clear to me that the enemy was able to gain a foothold because of the ignorance of the American people. Benjamin Franklin said it best: a nation well-informed men who have been taught to know and prize the rights which God has given them cannot be enslaved. It is in the region of ignorance that tyranny begins.
Mr. President, my sincere hope is that we can reset America by increasing Americans' understanding of our Constitution and founding principles and recognize that any individual or entity operating to usurp ownership of private property can and must be stopped by the recognition, comprehension, and protection of our U.S. Constitution. I would be honored to assist you and your administration.
Thank you, Mindy. That's also very, very well said. Thank you. Our next guest on this program is Professor Tim Ball. Professor Ball is an outspoken critic of anthropogenic global warming scare that has taken over our world. And
Dan,
Dr. Ball.
Dan, this is Brenda. I'm sorry I do not see Mr. Ball on at this time, but Brand Thornton is on.
Okay. I'll put Brand on, and if you would try to contact Tim Ball, please.
Sure.
All righty. Thank you. All right. We'll move on to our next guest, which is Brand Thornton. And Brand, I started speaking with just a few weeks ago. Brand has been deeply involved with the property rights issues that have surfaced as a result of the standoff that happened at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge, and he has been very closely following the Bundy Ranch situation. He was involved down there. And Brand, I would like to introduce you to the program and give you an opportunity to address the President.
Well, thank you. Dear Mr. President Trump, I'm sure your administration will need to correct a slew of unconstitutional abominations. And this could take weeks, months. We could talk about it forever. But the thing that's most important to me, and the first thing that I would like to see, is all the charges dropped against the Patriots. My friends, my dear friends, that are in prison right now without bail in Oregon and Southern Nevada. The Bundys, the Patriots, Joseph Robertson, Schaefer Cox, Charlotte Barbeau, and there's a whole slew of others. I'd like to see an investigation into the murder of my dear friend LaVoy Finicum and charges brought against Greg Bretzing and Dan Pilov and others that were involved in that calculated, cold-blood, cowardly murder. There was a great man before you, President Trump, by the name of John F. Kennedy. And he said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. The people ultimately get what they deserve. And if the people are complacent and not eternally vigilant, we will slip back. We dodged a bullet. Make no doubt about that. I think God above put you in office. You're the right man at the right time in the right place. There's only one thing I want from the federal government, and that is to be restricted to the delegated and specific enumerated powers contained in the Constitution of the United States. I don't think we as a people should expect or demand anything more than that what's in the Constitution. And if that is in effect what does take place, we will do just fine. We will do just fine. As a people, we need to not deny our own experiences of life, but we need to learn to succeed through our failures. America was meant to be a light to the world, a people of faith, a shining city on a hill. This is something that America has never completely realized. We have failed in so many ways. We need to embrace eternal principles. And without those eternal principles, we will just slip back into despair. There needs to be a spiritual revival in this country. So, President Trump, one thing you could do, another thing you could do, is eliminate the tax-exempt status. Get rid of it. I think it's called the 503C. And then from our pulpits and our pews, the priests, the ministers, the rabbis will be emboldened to teach the truth. But right now, they're in fear. And so that is one other thing that you can do. President Trump, I believe we need to be passionate in expressing our feelings of friendship and love towards our neighbors. And it's through adversity that we grow and progress. I've met some of the greatest people ever in this fight for freedom. The second greatest commandment God gave us is love our neighbor as we love ourselves. That's how we make America great. It is to embrace a spiritual foundation of love, to come to the aid of our fellow man at that critical time when they need it the most, like the Bundys and the Patriots did for Dwight and Steve Hammond when they were in so much despair and nobody could help them. Nobody would listen. They were threatened by a tyrannical government that if they spoke, they would have a bullet put in their head. And that you had brave people across this country, brave men who loved their fellow man more than their own lives, who have sacrificed everything up to this point, and may sacrifice everything in the future if we don't get help from you, Mr. President. This human nature.
15 seconds.
President Trump, his struggles in life are good in many ways, but there has to be an end to this. Sir, please bring it to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, Brand. That was certainly heartfelt, and I thank you for your efforts on behalf of property owners in the Southwest.
Amen.
Yes. Tim, is Dr. Ball on the call yet?
No, he is not.
Okay.
But you do have your next 3 or 4 guests.
Okay, let's move on then to Elias. Elias is one of the founders of Oath Keepers, one of the original founders. He is also a good personal friend, and Elias has started a group. In fact, he's had it for some time, but he's really working on it now, called the Mental Militia, which is a clearinghouse of freedom groups from all over the world. Elias, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Dan. A message to our President-elect. I am very grateful that the results came in as they did. I'd like to congratulate you on your election as the 45th president. I'm thankful that the American people chose you. The concerns and prayers of the great American majority are now focused on your upcoming term. My prayer is that you humble yourself well enough to keep your mind open and receptive to the facts of hidden history which in recent years have surfaced via the Internet. The American public which elected you has in recent years been learning of much mischief which has for over a century been proffered upon an unsuspecting American public. Your willingness to have such previously hidden facts offered for your personal knowledge shall play a large role in your decision-making as you chart America's course toward a return to greatness, a greatness built by the average working American, but which was perverted and undermined by secrecy and statecraft within the highest departments, agencies, and offices of the people's government. I speak with you as an honorably discharged U.S. Marine veteran of the Vietnam War, for which I volunteered with the intent to serve our country and thereby honor my family's tradition of patriotic military service to this country. As such, I have in my later years reviewed some peak moments of 20th century American history. Condensed into common man's language, I would impart this scenario to you. World War I was the first war in which machines were brought to the battlefield. Those machines were manufactured by private sector industry in league with governments and were to be used on the battlefield. After we won World War I, there existed nowhere on earth any enemy who could threaten us. But without an enemy, the arms industry, as the industrial part of what President Eisenhower would later call the military-industrial complex, and which had profited by furnishing governments with the implements and machinery of war, was faced with no market for its wares, its product. President Woodrow Wilson sent a U.S. delegation to the Paris peace talks in 1919, where Wall Street's finest worked with British delegation, which was known as the Royal the Royal Institute for International Affairs. Those British delegates convinced Wilson's delegation that an American branch of the Royal Institute for Foreign Affairs should be organized in the United States, and by 1921 they gave birth to the Council on Foreign Relations. The history of this, with the names of the founding members, was written by Peter Gross and is on the CFR's website. What followed was a concerted rebuilding of Germany by British banking and U.S. corporate powers combined with Federal Reserve assistance. This rebuilding of Germany stretched across the 1930s as American corporations did business with Germany. Such corporations included Remington Arms, Ford Motor Company, Rockefeller-owned Standard Oil of New Jersey, IBM, and many others. At that time, Prescott Bush sat on the board of Union Banking, a subsidiary of the Harriman Brothers Corporation, which was guided in part by Sullivan and Cromwell's Allen Dulles. Union Banking Corporation was seized in October of 1942 under the Trading with the Enemy Act, as Union Banking continued to do business with Germany even after we had declared war on Germany. Such are the temptations, Mr. Trump, of the military-industrial complex as exhibited by the father and grandfather of two U.S. presidents before you. That buildup led to Hitler's insanity of World War II, in which FDR sucker-punched America with the help of the Office of Naval Intelligence. Under the Red-Lease Act, FDR oversaw the shipment of atomic bomb materials from Malmstrom Air Force Base in Great Falls, Montana, directly to Russia, who at that time was our ally against Germany. That is sourced by Anthony Sutton's work. The Red-Lease Act also usually pumped American industry for the coming war effort, as reported by Professor
15 seconds.
We won the war. We had no enemy. We then created a Cold War. We had no enemy. We then created a war on terror, and the war on terror is what you should stop. We would totally recommend reinstating the militia system in the United States of America in every state capital as the Constitution requires. Thank you for studying the Constitution, and God bless your administration.
Thank you, Elias. I appreciate your point of view on that. It's certainly well taken. Our next guest is Bruce Moran. Bruce is a security consultant in Washington, D.C. He's worked with the State Department. He's worked with Congress, and he has extensive background in understanding the security apparatus that our country is supposed to function under. Welcome to the program, Bruce.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for allowing me to be on the program. Thanking everybody participating tonight to help understand different points of view, to help our country come back in a fight that President Trump is going to carry on through the first 100 days. I'd like to talk about economic national security first. I'm going to ask President Trump to encourage people to buy American. Americans are the largest consumers in the world.
Amen.
Start keeping more American dollars here in the United States. Buying American will have a multiplier effect. It will create jobs that put Americans back to work. It will bring American companies back home. Give American entrepreneurs and companies tax incentives to start building, and maintain and grow American businesses. Protect American jobs. It's really simple. The more people that work, the more people that pay taxes and contribute to the economic stability of the United States of our God-blessed country. The more stable the American economy, the greater our national security. More jobs beget more jobs. We all can grow, get stronger, prosper together to make America great, safe, and secure again. On national security, the United States must come face to face with the national security threat of hybrid, asymmetrical borders threats of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood, international drug cartels, and other foreign domestic enemies of the state. They must be named and countered. The transnational nature of these threats can no longer be underestimated nor ignored. We need new intelligence. We call it human in D.C. Its human intelligence sources must be established and modernized worldwide. We need to develop a strategy of on-the-ground tactical operations in the Middle East and around the world to directly counter ISIS and other threats when and where needed. We immediately need to launch, and this is through our new appointee, Jim Kelly, new border security operations and enforcement protocols already authorized under the existing law using the Secure Fence Act of 2006. The White House can spearhead. They can press ahead to cover existing gaps in the southern border, northern border, and on the Native American reservations. The White House needs to quickly institute oversight for program evaluations, gap measures, metrics, and high, low, and risk and exposures. Such oversight and action planning would begin to protect and secure our borders. We need to start immediately processing criminal illegal aliens out of our prisons, sending these criminals back to their own country. The savings and annual costs are anywhere between $50 billion and $75 billion a year. These monies can be rededicated to pay for our infrastructure repairs, our inner cities, law enforcement, our school programs, and the high-speed rail he is wanting to be introduced throughout the country. Through the State Department, a complete sea change is necessary at the Department of State. Specifically, a new foreign policy mission and policy framework must be developed and implemented immediately to re-educate, retool, reorientate, and retask the foreign affairs officials. This is not an easy task, and it must be undertaken by people like Rex Tillerson, who has the foresight and knowledge on how to have a new mission statement business model to reformulate from the ground up and firmly embed through all the different agencies and divisions in this entire State Department, which universally employs cost-effective measures, taking our tax dollars to the right purposes, and make sure they're accountable for them, responsible, and transparent. It wasn't done here, and we need to have that fully accountable for. We need to have a formal business model at the DOS, which will bring a big wake-up call to the D.C. bureaucrats and special interests who can directly, indirectly hamper the Department of State's ability to establish and maintain an effective foreign policy. A review of the DOS emerging nations and failed state programs, like was talked about by the last guest, reveals that they are in chaos and disarray. We must recognize that unless the DOS mission is changed, we will continue to have nothing but trouble in Iraq, Syria, and Libya. We also must recognize that the largest refugee crisis since World War II arose in Syria because the Department of State failed to take a strong leadership role. Trade. We need to enforce the trade law, review all trade agreements, and renegotiate when necessary. Set USTR accomplishments to non-compliance thresholds to follow. If thresholds are violated, withdraw from the trade agreements that are not followed. And here's an important part.
15 seconds.
Okay. International trade law follows U.S. national interests, which means it does not follow the already in place European and UN interests. There's quite a few things more, but I want to say God bless America. Thank you for having me on the program. God bless all the people who are contributing today, and have a very blessed and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Bruce. Merry Christmas to you and your family, and bless this country. Our next guest on the call-in will be Chuck Untersee. Chuck and Anita Untersee are movie producers, directors. They have created a new movie that's out with Charlie Daniels. It's called Revelation, and it will be coming to theaters near you. Chuck, welcome to the program.
Hello, Dan. Thank you for having me on.
You know, I was going to go into a lot of my favorite issues, but today I got an anonymous email from somebody, anonymously written, that it was so moving I thought I would just read it. So I'll just start, you know, that time's a problem. Here it is. A message to Donald Trump from the angry man. Excuse me. For all the pandering special interest groups that control American politics, the one which most certainly decided this election comes down to a simple demographic, the angry man. The angry man is difficult to stereotype. He comes from all economic backgrounds, dirt poor to wealthy. He represents all geographic areas in America, from sophisticated urbanite to working cowboys, deep south to Yankee north, left coast and right coast. Essentially, he's an American nationalist, patriot. No matter where they're from, angry men share many common traits. They aren't asking for handouts just to make their own way on a level playing field. They pay more than their share of taxes, work damned hard for what they have, and don't appreciate destruction of the republic. He's used to doing the right thing, not due to government regulation, but because it is the right thing. The angry man believes the Constitution should be interpreted as it was written, not as a living document, open to whims and vagaries of actors, judges, and political wind. The angry man owns firearms, is willing to pick up a gun and use it in defense of his home, his country, and family. He's willing to lay down his life to defend the freedom and safety of others. He always has and always will. His parents and grandparents were the greatest generation. The angry man is not and never will be a victim. Victimhood syndrome buzzwords such as disenfranchised, marginalized, and voiceless don't resonate. But press 1 for English causes rage. English is our national language. His last name, his race, and his religion don't matter. His ancestry might be Italian, English, African, Polish, German, Slavic, Irish, Russian, Hispanic, or countless others. What does matter is that he considers himself in every way to be an American. He's proud of this country and thinks that if you aren't, you are wholeheartedly encouraged to find one that suits you. If that offends, then good, as it's time for people to be offended from those who have too long been silent. The angry man is usually a man's man, married to real women who cherish motherhood and family, the kind of guy who likes to watch football, go hunting, join the military, maintain his own vehicles, and build stuff. He coaches kids baseball, soccer, and football. He's the kind of guy who can put an addition on his house with a couple of friends, runs a mom-and-pop business, or works the land. The angry man is the backbone of this country. Mr. Obama and Hillary forgot about us. He's not racist, but is truly disappointed and annoyed when people exhibit the worst stereotypes of their ethnicity. He's willing to give everybody a fair chance if they're willing to work hard and play by the rules. Above all else, he strives for integrity and a moral base to everything he does. He's not ashamed of God, and the nativity is okay. The angry man votes, and he loathes poor me attitude and government encourages. He loathes the inability of politicians to give a straight answer to an honest question. The tax dollars are given to people who simply don't want to work or assimilate. Mostly he loathes the blatantly arrogant bureaucratic attitude that we're too stupid to run our own lives while only those in government are smart enough to control us. The angry man has reached his limit when a social justice warrior or Black Lives Matter or communists proclaim they own our America. He may bite his tongue for a while. When a child gets charged with carrying a concealed weapon for mistakenly bringing a gun-shaped cupcake to school, he takes note of who the local idiots are who persecute innocents. The angry man knows too well Karl Marx founded politically correctness, and he ain't buying it. Sorry, Hillary. When government officials are caught red-handed breaking the law and get off scot-free, the angry man clenches his fist and raises himself for a coming fight, whatever that might be. He knows this fight will be live or die for the nation, but make no mistake, this is a fight which he's not willing to lose, and he will never give up on America. Obama calls him a clinger, Hillary calls him a deplorable, Bill calls him a redneck, feminists call him sexist, ISIS calls him an infidel, Donald Trump calls him an American. Merry Christmas, Mr. President. Do not forget those who put you in office. So, Dan, on behalf of our film Revelation, Donald Global Government, I want to say thank God to the angry men and women who turned the lights back on in America. It will truly be a Merry Christmas.
That is wonderful. Thank you, Chuck. And incidentally, that is an indication of the quality of the movie that you have produced, and I highly recommend that. And can you give us the website for your that they can order your movie?
Yeah, thanks. It's revelationthemovie.info, and for anyone interested in having it screened theatrically in your town, no matter how small the theater or how large,
you can go to our website and there's instructions there on how to do it, or you can buy it through our website, buy DVDs. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Chuck, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and Nita. Our next guest on the call is Mr. Trevor Loudon. Is Trevor on the call?
Yes, I am, Dan. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you. Trevor Loudon has written several books, and he just produced a new movie that I happen to be fortunate enough to get to be one of the first viewers, and that is Enemies Within, and that's from his latest book. And Trevor's from New Zealand. I believe you're calling from New Zealand, correct?
I am calling from Christchurch, New Zealand, and I'll tell you what, I'm sure the weather is a bit better here than it is up your way right now.
Well, I'd say it probably is. Trevor, I welcome you to the show, and I would like you to tell President Trump what you think he needs to tackle as our new president.
Well, look, I think one of the first things President Trump needs to do is to command the State Department by executive order to designate the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. And the reason I say that is this, because the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the father of Hamas and Al-Qaeda, is banned in several overseas countries. But in America, it's allowed to operate freely through numerous front groups like the Council on American Islamic Relations, Muslim American Society, Muslim Student Association. So you've got America is fighting the terrorists overseas, but allowing the terrorist supporters to openly operate in America, to interact with your congressmen, your senators, your State Department, your FBI, your Education Department, etc. So if President Trump designates the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization, as Hamas is, as Al-Qaeda is, that will shut down the Muslim infiltration into your country. Shut down the radical Islamic influence over your government. It would make a huge, huge difference. And the second thing I think Mr. Trump needs to do, needs to be pressured on this, he won his election largely on the promise to build a wall across the Mexican border and to deport illegal aliens. Now, he's softened that down to just deporting criminal illegal aliens. Well, by definition, if you're an illegal alien, you are a criminal. You've broken the law to get into the country. They all have to go, not just the ones who commit crimes. All of them have to go. And there is a reason for that, but it can be done without mass deportations, whatever. All they have to do is enforce the existing laws, to enforce E-Verify, so to cut off the jobs pipeline, cut off welfare benefits to illegals, and most of them would go home. And the reason I'm so hard line on this is very simple. Mr. Trump won the last election by a couple of million votes. There are anywhere between 12 and 40 million illegals in the country. If they all stay and they get citizenship and voting rights, which the Democrats will give them, they will vote 80% Democrat. That will basically bring about a one-party state in America. There will never be another Republican president. So for the salvation of the Republic, the illegals must go home. So those are the key security measures that must be taken. But Mr. Trump must rebuild the military very quickly. The Russians have a 3-to-1 nuclear advantage over America right now, and a massive advantage in conventional forces as well. And that doesn't count the Chinese and their Iranian allies and the North Koreans, etc. And he also must make America totally energy independent by opening up the Colorado and Utah and all the other oil and gas fields in the country that are currently locked up. And he needs to also return the federal lands in those western states back to the states so they can mine them and farm them to their people's advantages. So you need to cut that dependence on foreign oil, make America energy independent, and that will have a huge boost to business, bring a lot of investment back to America, and get the jobs rolling again. And then he's got to follow through on his promise of cutting taxes, got to cut taxes to the bone, and so that American businesses can make profits, so American workers can spend more of their hard-earned money in the local supermarkets and restaurants and buy more cars and, take more holidays and all these things that Americans enjoy doing. So I think the national security issues come first, rebuilding the military, building that wall in the Mexican border, clamping down on illegal immigration, heavily clamping down on Islamic immigration. I would stop totally Islamic immigration to the United States, and I would lower general levels of immigration full stop. The reason I say stopping Islamic immigration is when I came to America, I had to swear that I'd never been involved in any Nazi or communist group that sought to overthrow the U.S. Constitution. If you believe in Sharia law, if you're an observant Muslim who believes in Sharia law, that is an imposing Sharia law that is completely contrary to the U.S. Constitution. You're basically advocating the overthrow of the Constitution. So anybody who believes in Sharia law, who advocates for Sharia law, but should not be allowed into America. That's period, full stop. It's like inviting totalitarians into your country. We're not talking about a religion here. We're talking about a political totalitarian system. So those are the measures that have to be done. General levels of immigration should be cut. America used to bring in about 300,000 immigrants a year for year after year after year, and those numbers can be absorbed. Now it's way, way over 1 million legal immigrants, plus nobody knows how many illegal immigrants, and America cannot cope with that. It's breaking down the social structure. It's breaking down, the financial structure of the country, and it should be stopped. So those are my priorities, Dan. Those are what I think President Trump needs to do straight away, because the left are mobilizing to stop him. The Democrats are mobilizing to stop him, and he's got a very short window of opportunity to do stuff before the midterm elections start rolling around, and his whole agenda could be finished. So he has to do those things as quickly as possible.
Okay, well, thank you, Trevor. I appreciate your insight, and thank you from New Zealand, and have a Merry Christmas. Our next
thank you.
Thank you. Our next guest on the show is Shauna Cox. I recently met Shauna through the radio program, and Shauna has been very actively involved in the ranch access to public lands, and was in the vehicle with Lavoy Finicum when he was murdered in Oregon. And with that, Shauna, I'd like to give you the floor, and thank you for being on our show.
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. And I understand there's a letter to President Trump. So I'm saying, dear President-elect Trump, America is watching you as you have been pulling your transition team together. We know that you have been a very successful businessman and have a great understanding of what it takes to make a business run smooth. We're praying that you will continue to use those same abilities to put a great group together who have the desire to uphold and defend our Constitution. I am a personal witness to the atrocities that have been inflicted upon the people of this nation from a federal government that is out of control. We now have many Americans, veterans, hardworking families who have been attacked and forced and regulated out of business by greedy politicians and people of nobility, along with the elite who have put us into this slavery. The nation was being awakened in the spring of 2014 when the Clive and Bundy family was attacked by an army of federal agencies who claimed they were just doing their job. Really? What job was that? To attack, tase, throw down, sick dogs on, and imprison unarmed Americans for taking pictures from their iPad? Maybe they deserved it because they were witnesses to the armed agencies stealing their cattle, private property, and resources. Maybe this isn't America after all. Maybe it has become a communist nation where you are regulated and forced to follow the master. Will you be a king, Mr. President, or a president? Right now, Cliven Bundy, along with 4 of his sons and 16 others in Nevada and 8 more in Oregon, are being tried in a railroad court to be imprisoned for years. Gerald DeLumas, Michael Emery, Pete Santilli, and other media were arrested also and are still in jail. Dwight and Stephen Hammonds, ranchers in Oregon, are still in prison for the second time. Joe Robertson, 77, from Montana, imprisoned over a stock pond, and the list goes on and on. Lavoy Finicum was murdered in cold blood. When does it stop? Please, Mr. Trump, when you have the chance, help save these true Americans who all came to the rescue of their neighbors and friends and are the good guys. They destroyed nothing, attacked no one, harmed no one. They are the kind of people who help their neighbors, which is what got them into trouble in the first place. They are being held in our prisons, being treated as terrorists when the guilty are all going free. America has a real problem. As you well know, this is the last free country in the world, a sacred land preserved for a righteous and a moral people. If we don't preserve our Constitution, we will no longer have our God-given rights of freedom to do the same thing you have been able to do, to become a self-made man through your own labors. Will you help us? We need to bring these men and women back to their families. We need to stand together against the real conspirators. United we stand, divided we fall. We all need to remember, especially at this time of year, God sent his Son as a gift to the world to teach us how to live in love and peace. We are all sending prayers your way, and we want to wish you and your family a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Love, Shauna Cox, and Americans.
Thank you, Shauna. That was a terrific message.
Amen.
Make sure that he hears. Our next guest on the program is Mr. Tom Osborne. Tom is a retired LAPD Special Operations Officer, and he is also a true patriot that actually understands the role of law enforcement and the role of ISIS and the Islamic threat that we have in our country. Tom is has a master's degree in religions, international religions, and he understands the threat we face. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dan. Let me start with my 3 cents worth talking about a strategy issue that I would like to suggest our president follow. It's very important that he not fail in his first efforts out of the box. He's got to come out as a winner. In order to do that, I think he has to prioritize the things he wants to bring about change in according to their degree of difficulty. That is, the things that have the highest probability of success, therefore the easiest things to do, are the ones that he should do first to establish a track record of success. Nothing succeeds like success. And with the opposition arrayed against him as great as it is, he cannot afford to give them any evidence of failure, at first particularly. Now, it's easy to say that most people try to do the most important things first, but unfortunately, the most important things are usually the most difficult to accomplish. And if we spend all of our horsepower trying to do those things first, we never get to those things we could do that would make the nation much better and safer all the way around. So I feel he's got to prioritize according to the degree that he is sure he can win those battles and do those first that he has a high chance of success with, whether it's building the wall or repealing Obamacare, dealing with sanctuary cities, whatever he wants to do. Those that he has the highest probability of success in terms of all the wherewithal that it takes to make that kind of a change, to accomplish that objective in the Senate and the Congress, are those things that he should do first to make sure that he comes off starting out as a winner and can establish that kind of a precedent and expectation as a winner. My second 2 cents worth is we have to stop the accommodation and appeasement of Islam and the Islamization of America. As we should have learned by now from the experiences in Europe, that kind of accommodation and appeasement only enables them. It's a form of lack of opposition that enables any evil or sin to keep going. We must not allow them, in the name of tolerances for their multicultural diversity, to have privileges in our schools, in our courts, anywhere that we don't give the same privileges to Christians, Jews, Mormons, atheists, what have you. We've got to make sure that we do not enable them to bridge our rights of free speech. That has to be our line in the sand. Or not infiltration of our courts with Sharia law, which is not at all compatible with American law. We must not allow them to keep having special privileges, and we must make a distinction between Islam and jihad. It's one thing to say Islam is a terrible religion, but like it or not, whether true or not, the practice of Islam by its Muslims is protected by the United States Constitution. If we try to make war against Islam, we're going to lose. However, the things that the jihadists commit in terms of acts of violence, murder, beheading, torture, rape, robbery, kidnapping, they are not protected by the Constitution. They are crimes. The same thing is true of the non-physical crimes like sedition, intimidation, extortion. Those are crimes. They are not permitted by the United States Constitution. And those are the specific activities of the jihadists who are trying to undermine our country. We have to make a distinction between Islamophobia and jihadophobia. If we stick to jihadophobia, we can win. Terrorists can be defeated. ISIS can be defeated, is being defeated in part now. Al-Qaeda has been defeated in the past. Terrorists and terrorist cells can be defeated. Terrorism cannot be defeated until we defeat the ideology that undermines it. And that ideology is a worldview of Islamic supremacy and domination. It's a global caliphate under Sharia law. That ideology is what must be defeated if we're going to defeat terrorism. And the last has to do with supporting our local police. I don't know what happened in our country that changed the way we look at things, where we used to celebrate the good guys, the heroes in blue on our streets that risk their lives every day to protect us, and they became the bad guys, and the thugs on the street are now the heroes. Things we used to celebrate, we now condemn, and the things we used to condemn, we now celebrate. I don't know how that happened, but it's not good, and we need to resist any movement that denigrates the police. We need to understand that there are several organizations out there, Black Lives Matter, the Muslim Brotherhood, the American Communist Party, the progressive left in general, that would all be very pleased if we could sufficiently diminish the ability of the police to respond to major public disorder. In order to destabilize any country, we've got to reduce or inhibit the ability of the police to respond to public disorder. So we have to allow them not to intimidate our police into non-action. And we look at what happened in Ferguson as an example after the second day, and the police were all standing there while all these major felony crimes were taking place right across them. We must not let the American movements or the American media so denigrate and diminish the police that they are intimidated or afraid to do the actions necessary to protect us on the streets. That's my 3 cents worth. I thank God for giving us the opportunity to, again, save our country and our faith. And I wish President-elect Trump and his whole administration Godspeed in their mission.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I may erupt, my name is David Broadhurst, a.k.a. The Gator with the Gator Show, here on Indie Rock 101 Nashville. We need a little station identification. Bear with me. Right now, everybody in America, we are live tonight on Indie Rock 101 Nashville, the Southern Broadcasting Network, hosting the Republican News Network with the Republic of the United States of America. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Okay. Thanks, Gator. Our next guest on the show is J.D. King, J.D. is a young man who's made several movies, including his latest one, which is called Blue, about the false premise of the environmental movement. J.D., welcome to the show.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to take a few minutes and talk about environmental overreach. I've been exposed to so much of that here in America in the last few years, and have just seen how people and private property rights have been trampled in the name of saving a species. And so specifically, I wanted to focus on Endangered Species Act reform. Because the Endangered Species Act has been used and abused by out-of-control maverick government agencies, together with elite wealthy special interest groups who really care more about their own jobs and salaries and snail darters and spotted owls and gray wolves than they do about freedom, private property rights, the economy, and even fellow Americans. The Endangered Species Act has allowed for the gross enlargement and overreach of the federal government. It has allowed for a whirlwind of revolving doors of radical environmentalists and bureaucrats to self-appoint and hire extreme, what I would call anti-humanists, who really don't understand the diverse, individualistic, and complex needs and wants of the local people who are impacted in any given community in the United States by overreaching environmentalism, especially when it comes to the Endangered Species Act. And for these reasons, I just want people to think about endangered species management being entirely turned over to state and local jurisdiction. Within the last several decades, for example, I could talk about the impact of the spotted owl. We've seen a loss of 50,000 jobs just in the state of Montana in the timber industry, just because of how it's been shut down by environmentalism. Tens of thousands of jobs in Washington and other states in the Pacific Northwest have been lost in the timber industry because of the spotted owl. It's a classic example of the environmentalists and working with the government to destroy communities and jobs, and families really have been torn apart as employment in these parts of rural America has continued to decline because of the Endangered Species Act. All the while, let me reemphasize that any benefit that might have been seen to the owl population has been negligible, if even non-existent. In this case, it was proven, as with most cases of Endangered Species Act protection, or overprotection, I should say, that extreme environmental protectionism has made things worse, not just for the owl. The population does continue to decline, but the communities and the forests themselves in which the owls call home have suffered as well. And because of overprotectionism, we've seen levels of forest fires that we've never seen before. We're creating massive catastrophic fires that do more damage to the environment and the species that live there than any other event in really in American history. But for example, ExxonMobil has been ranked as one of the world's largest corporate polluters. It produces just about 10 million pounds of toxic air pollution a year. But during just 3 summer months a few years ago, a fire here in North America released 66 billion pounds of just one of the toxic chemicals it spewed. In other words, that's 6,600 times more pollution than ExxonMobil releases in an entire year. Wildfires in North America are on the rise. They're out of control, particularly in the western United States. The fires are emitting more dangerous pollutants into the air than all of the tailpipes and smokestacks in the United States. And while that extends beyond endangered species, it is a side effect of environmental protectionism that has just been rampant and out of control here in America in the last several decades. So we need to replace this concept with active management and the idea of mankind optimizing the environment, because nature, while it is resilient and it's incredible, it doesn't always optimize itself. And the idea that it does is frankly a myth. But I could talk about the prairie dog, I could talk about the sage grouse, I could talk about the gray wolf. The species never seem to matter. The environment never seems to be improved, and private property rights together with the people of America who hold that inalienable right to own property, always seem to be the ones left holding the bag. They get hurt, and it's oftentimes irrevocable. So that's pretty much what I want to share with you tonight, and I just want to encourage the Trump administration to consider ways to hand endangered species jurisdiction back over to the states.
Great. Thank you, J.D., and Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Hey, thanks so much,
they're
Dan.
great patriots, and I appreciate everything they've done as well. Our next guest is Mr. Harry Boyens, and Harry is someone who is a very accomplished author. He has a PhD in physics, and he is also the author of a book called Amabulu, The Real History of South Africa. And Harry, you're living in Vancouver, BC. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Dan. And if I may, I should like to address President-elect Trump. Mr. President-elect, I should like to congratulate you on an epic victory. You deserved it because you worked very hard for it. I should also like to point out that I'm not a citizen of the United States. I'm, in fact, a South African Canadian, a Presbyterian by faith, a legal immigrant to Canada who has lived and worked in the United States. I hope to convey to you three key issues that I consider very important in the international arena. They've impacted my own life very directly, and I can speak with some authority on them. As a first point, I should like to urge you to restore the United States to its rightful international position of strength. The West, including Canada, sometimes laments America when it acts from strength, but the same West fundamentally relies on that strength. After all, your country twice saved the West through the use of arms at the cost of much blood and treasure. After 8 years of the Obama administration, your friends no longer trust you. Your enemies no longer fear you. Few respect you. Others openly mock you. Many simply ignore the United States. In the interest of all of us who sail in your collective wake, please restore your country to its proper position. No man worth his salt respects a leader who, quote, leads from behind. President Kennedy's weakness at the Bay of Pigs gave us the Cuban Missile Crisis. The weakness of Congress in 1975 gave us the Clark Amendment. That act turned Africa over to the Soviet Union on a silver platter. And that, together with weakness and neglect on the part of President Clinton, led straight as an arrow to the 9/11 attacks. It also lost the West the minerals-rich Southern Africa. As a second point, I beg you, stop the policy of trying to export multicultural democracy to places where it does not fit. Democracy is one of the pearls of Western civilization. It relies on a nation being civilized, having respect for the rule of law, and having respect for the opinions of one another. Bringing supposed democracy to people who do not value the lives of their fellow human beings is definitely not going to make them value their opinions. It has caused nothing but misery, mayhem, upheaval, and destruction. Please do not proverbially cast the hard-won pearls of civilization before the swine and then tempt God to produce a miracle. This infantile policy has failed all over the Middle East and has given Iraq to extremist Iran. It has given us the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Now it's given us the horror of ISIS everywhere. It's also given us the wholly corrupt and racist ANC regime of South Africa that daily terrorizes the white people of that country. Thousands of white farmers have been murdered, often tortured to death, while the government incites the majority of black people against them. Your mainstream media refuses to report on this because the truth does not fit their narrative. As a third point, I should like to caution you about that mainstream national media. You've already seen how they've twisted and manipulated everything you've said or suggested. Can you imagine what they do to the truth about decent friends of America in faraway places who have no one speaking for them? I was born in South Africa, where my family ancestors were largely Northern European, but also included the first American immigrants to Southern Africa in 1666. Ironically, they came from what is now Stone Street in Manhattan. Your media has basically assassinated the character of the Afrikaner nation I was born into. Yet we are the people with the closest genetic profile and historical experience to that of Americans. We are, in fact, your closest cousins on earth. The U.S. media has unremittingly lambasted the Afrikaners of South Africa as a nation to the point where it now faces the first stages of genocide. At the same time, they convinced 330 million innocent Americans that Nelson Mandela was a man of peace. In fact, he created and led the military wing of his ANC party, he underwent training in bomb-making in Ethiopia, and he orchestrated the planting of some 200 bombs. The U.S. media man who played a central role in this deception serves at this very moment in the Obama administration. He actually wrote Mandela's autobiography. He carefully deleted from that book Mandela's role as a senior leader in the South African Communist Party. This is your media at work. The result is that South Africa, a key ally in 2 world wars and the Korean War, in fact, my own family protected your soldiers on the ground in Italy from the air pilot. It is now a banana republic. It's under the sway of a savage communist who's starting to emulate Idi Amin. The country is today in the Sino-Russian-Iranian camp. This endangers your supply of key minerals, exactly as the Soviet Union's Leonid Brezhnev tried to do in the 1970s. So I ask of you, Mr. President-elect, these 3 things in the interest of all I know we both hold dear. Sir, I wish you every success in your role as leader of what remains of the free world. May God help you spare your own people, my closest cousins, to the fate that has befallen South Africa, otherwise known as the Second America. Sir, I pray you hear me, for we are all in your hands. Thank you.
Well, Harry, as usual, that was brilliant. And Merry Christmas to you and your family, and God bless you for everything you've done.
Thank you.
Our next guest on this radio show is Dr. Michael Kaufman. Dr. Kaufman is a PhD in forestry, and he has led the anti-Agenda 21 fight along with Tom DeWeese and several others that we've had on our show. Michael, welcome to the call.
Well, thank you, Dan. I do appreciate it. One of the things that I would like to relay, of course, is Agenda 21 and its subsequent follow-up, Agenda 2030. What we're seeing here is a major effort by the United Nations to basically take over the world in some sort of a governance pattern. It's called global governance. It's one of those issues in which you have to understand the magnitude of what they're trying to do to be able to appreciate the dangers. And it's a real threat to the United States. Now, I don't have any doubt at all that President-elect Trump will do the right thing when it comes to a lot of these programs. What I don't think he fully understands, or may not understand, is the fact that these particular programs are designed to interlock and actually sneak in out of the door. Almost everything that Obama has done in the past 8 years is a direct of what the United States committed to do under Bill Clinton to the United Nations and Agenda 21. All of his programs and so forth are linked back through what is called Sustainable America to the United Nations and Agenda 21. And now we're launching Agenda 2030, in which you're going to see even more socialist efforts to control people, to control everything that goes on in the world through all of these agreements and so forth that seem to be independent but are not. One of those agreements, as we've already probably discussed tonight, is global warming. Now, I'm a scientist. I have a PhD in my
Hello? I thought we lost it.
International community, that the scientific community supports the fact that man is causing global warming. Now, I have no doubt that we have some sort of an impact on it, but the fact that we are going to destroy the earth and us along with it unless we impose these draconian efforts that President Obama has defined quite often over the last 8 years is just patently false. And there is really very, very little scientific evidence, empirical scientific evidence, to suggest that man has a major impact on global warming. And I hope we understand that, because one of the things that Tim Ball probably has already talked about earlier in this conversation is the fact that we see almost no correlation between what man does and what is happening with global warming. The very warm 2015, 2016 is not caused by global warming. It's caused by an El Nino in the Pacific Ocean. The two are totally unrelated. And right now we're heading into a period of cooler temperatures. Whether those are sustained for a period of time, we don't know. But there's all kinds of evidence to suggest that we're going into a cooling cycle that might last several decades. One of the problems with what we're seeing in this effort is the fact that we're signing on to something in which we're giving the United Nations and the federal government control over our economy. And I think you understand very well that government control over the economy is not a desirable thing. Having said that, I do appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mike, and I appreciate your comments on this. You're absolutely on the money. We need to end this attack on prosperity known as UN Agenda 21 and UN Agenda 2030.
Yes.
Gator, do we have a few extra minutes that we can, because we've still got several guests we want to talk.
First off, all the guests tonight, I want to thank you so much for all your input tonight with our country, because I'll tell you what, I've got so many listeners listening in, and they're not even hardly talking; they're just listening. And this is what we need, everybody, with the Republic of the United States of America. So many great, great men and women coming aboard, speaking their voice. I'll tell you what, yes, you have all the time that you need, sir, right here with Indie Rock 101 Nashville.
All righty, well, good. Did we ever get Tim Ball back on the line? Is there any?
How about Bob Fanning?
Well, Bob, you're next, but I was trying to get Tim Ball on the call. Why don't you go ahead, and I'd like to introduce Bob Fanning. He is a bond trader. He has been a member in the past of the Chicago Board of Trade. He is just in the process of going back and trying to do some of the salvation of our country through the bond trading at the Chicago Board of Trade. Bob, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's a real treat to be invited to speak for you the fourth time, Dan. And I'm on my way back to high ground trading at the Chicago Board of Trade, thanks to Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump has just given the green light to every entrepreneur and capitalist on the planet that it's safe to take a risk again. It's safe to take a risk again, and I'm going back to have a field day at the Chicago Board of Trade. You've mentioned the bad news. The bad news is that we had the leftists in control for the last 8 years. The good news is the fact that for the last 8 years, American international companies have held monies in offshore accounts. Mr. Trump says it's safe for that money to come back. We can call that internally generated cash flow for the United States Treasury, which will service the debt, this enormous debt that Mr. Obama has run up, and make it possible to fund the infrastructure programs that are going to go on. I would say that we have learned a lesson since 2008. The Greenspan put was inspired by financial engineers in collusion with social engineers in order to deindustrialize, depopulate, and slow down the American economy so the rest of the world could catch up to us. Mr. Trump says it's America first, and I think that that's the engine that will start our global economy again, kickstart our global economy again. But so does the Federal Reserve. They just announced that they're going to start by raising interest rates 25 basis points last week. That was the starting gun, and now that it's safe to take risks, I think that Mr. Trump will go down in history as the greatest president that the United States of America ever had. And the reason he's going to do that is because he's going to supply capital to the capital markets, because he's going to make it safe for capitalists to invest and take risks.
Amen.
So I think that it's not a bad sign to see interest rates go up. I think it's a good sign. It'll show activity in a marketplace. But I caution Mr. Trump not to let another 2008 happen again. Mr. Trump has chosen Mr. Mnuchin to represent the interests of Wall Street. We need the interests of Main Street represented as well. And I advise Mr. Trump to bring on somebody like William K. Black, Ph.D., J.D., to sit on the Federal Reserve Board, maybe even be the Federal Reserve Chairman, and make sure that the anti-fraud provisions in the Federal Reserve are enforced. They looked the other way for the last 8 years, and fraud made our financial system a Ponzi scheme. We don't want a Ponzi scheme anymore, Mr. Trump. I would like you to meet with somebody like William K. Black once a quarter to make sure that the Federal Reserve is enforcing their own anti-fraud provisions. I also would caution Mr. Trump to look at the money behind this global warming scam. There's $10 trillion notional amount of carbon credit derivatives that they can't wait to start trading. Don't give the supranational socialism the funding to get started. The only way supranational socialism will work is for this global warming scam to happen. So don't let this carbon credit trading cloud your vision. Global warming is baloney. According to Dr. Willie, soon we get more activity from sunspots, volcanoes, and forest fires than we do from your Escalade firing up in the morning. So do you have any questions, Dan?
No, that's perfect, Bob. I always enjoy hearing your opinions on things because you seem to have a very clear understanding of what's been going on in our country. And thank you, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Fantastic,
Find me at
Bob.
High Ground Trading at the Board of Trade. Thank you.
All righty, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Brenda, have we gotten Tim Ball back on the call at all, or are we still waiting?
Hi, Dan. He was having trouble. I think I have him on. Mr. Ball, are you on with me?
Yes, I can hear you
wonderful.
both.
There you go.
Wonderful. Okay, Tim Ball is a professor from he's retired now, but he was professor of science at the University of Winnipeg, and Tim Ball is a very well-known atmospheric, I guess would call you a climate denier as far as man-caused global warming, and had the wonderful opportunity to meet Tim and visit with him at the Freedom Force 3rd Congress down in Phoenix, Arizona, just a week and a half ago. And Tim, welcome to the show, and please give us your insights as you speak to President-elect Trump.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I went from being a global warming skeptic, and then we pointed out that all scientists are skeptics, and if you're not a skeptic, you're not a scientist, and that went away. But global warming went away as well. And, of course, it became climate change, and then we were called climate change deniers with all the Holocaust connotations of that word. But, of course, the amusing thing is my whole career, 40 years, has been trying to explain to people how much the climate changes. And so it was very interesting. Yeah, I was 9 years in the Canadian Air Force and flying anti-submarine during the Cuban crisis over the Atlantic, and then 5 years search and rescue in the Arctic, where I learned a great deal about the climate, the world's climate, and the world. And so I lost my flying category, and I didn't want to stay in the Air Force unless I could fly. And so I went back to university, and I did it the right way. I went back when I was 30 years old and had an idea who I was and what I wanted to do. Ironically, I chose climate because it was an interesting and a nice quiet area. And when I got into it in the late 60s and early 70s, global cooling was the consensus. And the CIA were writing reports on the impact of cooling on food production and social unrest that would follow. And then I was as opposed to that global cooling consensus, because of course science isn't about consensus, as I later became about the global warming issue that came in, because the climate shifts up and down all of the time. And in fact, in my lifetime, there's been 4 climate trends. I mean, the early part of my life, from 1900 to 1940, global temperatures were going up, and then from 40 to about 80, they were going down, and then from 80 to about 1999, they were going up, and now they're going down again. So it's what I call the trend wagon, and it became reinforced after the global cooling trend ended, and starting, as I said, about 1980, and the world started to warm up. But by 88, it had been selected as a vehicle for a political agenda, and that was the difference. And so it wasn't just fighting against or getting people to understand that climate changes all the time and the trends that were going on were perfectly normal, but it was fighting against the use of global warming for a political agenda. And of course, what I did at the Phoenix conference was trying to help people understand. One of my great heroes, and I showed the cover of his book at the conference, is Václav Klaus, who was the former president of the Czech Republic, and he actually was the keynote speaker at the first Climate Skeptics Conference. And I say that because there have been a lot of climate conferences, these people flying all over the world at taxpayers' expense to exotic places, the most recent Marrakesh in Morocco. But the Heartland Institute in Chicago held a conference in New York in 2011, at which the first was the first Skeptics Conference, and Václav Klaus was the keynote speaker. And his opening remark was, we've gone through 70 years of communism, why the hell would we want to go back to that? And the whole audience just erupted. I mean, it was just quite an amazing thing. And his book, which it's hard to get a copy of, but its title is superb, because its title is Blue Planet in Green Shackles, because the global warming issue was a subset of the whole use of environment to control people. And we see that battle going on now with the with Obama's use of the EPA and dictating to people what they can and cannot do, and of course Trump opposing that. But the global warming issue was the major factor, because they needed an issue that was global in its impact. And it had to transcend national boundaries, because the whole objective was to argue that this was more than any one nation could deal with. It needed a world government, and it needed a world carbon tax to pay for it, collected by the International Monetary Fund and run through the United Nations. And that's how the whole thing took on a global nature. Now, I haven't described the details of what they did, but if you have any questions at this point, Dan?
No, actually, Tim, that is excellent. And so your recommendation to President-elect Trump would be what?
Well, I went from Phoenix to Washington, and I had the opportunity to have direct input. I gave a presentation on Capitol Hill along with Tony Heller, who's been showing how they've literally been manipulating the world temperature records. Every single one's been adjusted to make the warming look like more than it is. And then also Senator Malcolm Roberts, who is a fellow I've worked with for 6 years, helped him set up a group called the Galileo Movement. And Malcolm is unique because politicians have challenged other politicians, but nobody had challenged the bureaucrats. And, of course, the whole orchestration of global warming was done through the bureaucracy of the World Meteorological Organization, because Maurice Strong, the Canadian who set this up, knew that if he could control the bureaucrats, they could then control the politicians, because the politicians didn't know anything about the science. So anyway, I appeared on Capitol Hill with those two gentlemen. Then we went to meet, and we were introduced by Myron Ebell. Now, I'd known Myron, who was from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I had met him 25 years ago when I appeared before Congress on this issue, and then I went and gave a presentation to the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and I've talked with him and communicated with him ever since. What he was told a month before the election by the Trump people, that he was going to be put in charge of orchestrating the transition and of the EPA and the climate issue. And so after the Capitol Hill presentation, we went over to the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and they had a group called Cooler Heads, about 100 people there. 8 of the 12 that are in the Trump transition for the EPA were present. Scott Pruitt, of course, who's been appointed as director of EPA, wasn't present because he hasn't been nominated yet, so that would not have been appropriate. But the discussion was all about what they could do, how the whole climate issue had been used, the global warming, why CO2 became the focus, we had a long discussion about that. And then there were very serious discussions about what the Trump administration should do, not to dismantle the EPA. Trump doesn't want to get rid of the EPA completely. As you know, he's publicly said, "I want clean air and clean water," and everybody wants that. Those are sort of motherhood issue things. But what he wants to stop is the use of bureaucrats to push agendas and create policies that dictate to people what they can and cannot do. And it's that Mary McCarthy, the great American social critic, said many years ago, bureaucracy is the rule of nobody. It's the modern form of despotism. And we've seen that in the United States and, in fact, around the world. So it was great to have that input directly to the people that are going to make the recommendations to Mr. Trump. One of the issues, by the way, Dan, was can the U.S. walk away from or get out of the Paris Climate Conference Agreement? And that, of course, is a very important issue because of the amount of money that's they've been committed to go into that Green Climate Fund, which was a replacement for Kyoto. Right, and they pledged, the nation's pledged $100 billion a year to go into that. Very few of them have been putting their money in. Obama's put some in, and Canada has. But just very quickly, the answer to can they get out of the Paris climate agreements, the lawyers were there, and they said, yeah, there are clauses in the Paris Agreement that says you can get out, but only after 2 years and things like that. But, of course, the final agreement was, look, if the U.S. just walks away, there's nothing the world can do about it.
Right, exactly. And Tim, I applaud you for being involved with this the way you have been, and you're absolutely right. The best way to end that climate agreement is just cut off the money and walk away.
Yep, exactly. Well, and of course that's what's been keeping it going. You see, the funding through the weather offices and for example, there's Joanne Nova, an Australian woman's got a very good website. She did a study showing that the U.S. are spending $70 billion a year on climate change, and it isn't doing anything. It's just right. Fueling the bureaucracies and paying these crony capitalists like Solyndra and all the rest of them. I mean, it's just criminal what's going on.
It really is. Well, Tim, thank you for your input on this. We need to move on to our next speaker. And thank you for being involved, and thank you, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and your wife.
Well, thank you. And any questions that you have at any time, I'm happy to answer them for you, Dan.
I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is President of the Republic, Jim Geiger. And Jim, I know you've been patiently waiting for about a half an hour. We're kind of running over, but I do want you to have an opportunity to speak.
The President will speak, and then we will end the show tonight. The President, I yield. God bless you, sir, tonight.
Thank you, Gator, and it's a pleasure for the Republic for the United States, along with the Indie Rock 101 family, to actually be the platform for providing all these guests to speak to President Trump. And I do have a few closing words for President Trump, President-elect Trump. I did begin speaking about President Trump as early as February of this year to the American people, specifically in my State of the Republic address to the Republic for the United States Congress. I referred to someone with a business acumen, and let me read you the sentence where I referred to President Trump. Who knows? The American people might be blessed to have someone with business acumen to serve as President and CEO of the U.S. corporation alongside of the President of the Republic to ensure a smooth transition back to a lawful, peaceful society, one in which there is liberty and justice for all. And then again, in my Thanksgiving address to the American people, I referred to President Trump. I said, I am hopeful that President Trump will go down in history as the transition president. What do I mean by that? Basically, that he will work side by side with the American people to bring back constitutional governance to this country. So, as it stands today, President Trump is about to be handed the keys to the U.S. corporation, or I would say the key to the U.S. corporation when he's sworn into the office. I hold the key to the Republic. Believe it or not, we have two governments in this country today. Both of those governments are interim in nature by law. The U.S. corporation has served the American people since around the time of the Civil War. It's served, believe it or not, in an interim capacity. The Republic for the United States of America has been serving the American people since around 2010, when the Republic was lawfully re-inhabited. So I want to paint a picture for President Trump today. In my address to the American people, I'd say that let's pretend like we've got a door that's in front of us, and that door has a place for two different keys in order for that door to be open. And I hold one of the keys, and President Trump, after he's sworn in, will hold the other key. And that key is the door to our inheritance as Americans. That door represents liberty and justice for all, and that door represents our God-given unalienable rights that stands behind that door. And the people that have been speaking to myself and to President Trump on this call today, on this platform, have been talking about, in essence, they've been talking about going back to Americans having unalienable rights. And that's given by God and can't be taken away from us. And I would encourage President Trump, if he has not read it already, and those of you listening to me today, to go to the Republic for the United States.org, and there's a document there called Lawful Continuation of the Republic. And I would encourage him to read that so he has a better understanding of what I'm saying here. What we've done has been done lawfully and peacefully, and we're going to continue down that road. And we're going to continue down the road of giving Americans a platform so their voice can be heard. Now, I'd like to close out the program tonight with my Christmas address. And believe it or not, I might be more politically incorrect than President Trump is, but I'm going to address Christmas and Hanukkah all at the same time. So here's my address for the holidays. As it turns out, both Christmas Eve and the first night of Hanukkah both fall on December 24th this year. One might ask what do Christmas and Hanukkah have in common. Biblical historians who study the scriptures closely might say that we would not be celebrating Christmas unless it was for the first Hanukkah. Had it not been for the first Hanukkah, there would have been no Jewish community to whom Jesus could deliver his good news and no disciples to spread the message. They might also say that Jesus was not born during the Christmas season, that he, in fact, from a biblical, historical perspective, was most likely immaculately conceived during the Christmas/Hanukkah season. All the more reason to celebrate. That being said, historically, the Republic has close ties with both the Christian and Jewish communities. After all, the one individual most responsible for the founding of our Republic is, in fact, Jewish from the Davidic line of Judah. We have acknowledged the fact that our forefathers covenanted with him for divine protection and guidance during the founding of the Republic, which, with their appeals to heaven, as recorded in our founding documents. He is the lawgiver by whom our law form was given. In addition, let us not forget Chaim Solomon, who some would label the chief financial architect of the American Revolution, without whose help the Revolutionary War would have been hard-pressed to get off its feet, or get his feet off the ground, so to speak. He enlisted the help of the Jewish community, among others, who all had a vested interest in the concept of liberty and justice for all. He was truly a gift to our forefathers. During this season of remembrance, let us also choose to remember the sacrifices our forefathers made in order to give us the Republic. I specifically call to remembrance George Washington and the Continental Army's crossing of the Delaware River on Christmas Eve, 1776, which led to a successful surprise attack against the Haitian forces in Trenton, New Jersey, on the morning of December 26th. We owe a great debt of gratitude to those brave souls and to the God they serve. So let's choose to acknowledge the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob during this season of remembrance. Let us thank him for giving us the gift of his only beloved Son, that we might have life and have it more abundantly. Let us all acknowledge his handiwork in the affairs of men. Let us all continue to look to him for wisdom and guidance as we hold hands together, working for the restoration of all things. Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah. President Geiger.
Amen.
Back to you, Geiger.
All right. Gentlemen, would it be okay if I close this program with a prayer?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's bow our heads. Our Heavenly Father, we come to you in gratitude for giving us another chance to restore the miracle of freedom known as the United States of America. We know that our constitutional heritage is a Christian heritage and that we cannot survive as a free republic without your guidance and your blessing. We are thankful for the vision of liberty given by you to our founding fathers and ask your help in restoring and enhancing that vision of freedom. Lord, bless our speakers and guests as we share the many truths that are necessary to restore our freedom, and bless us with your presence amongst us as we shared this information together. Give us wisdom and vision as we work together to restore our great republic. And Lord, please protect President-elect Trump from harm. Please guide his footsteps as he attempts to stop the rush to global socialism and paganism. Bless the work of Freedom Force and bless the work of the Republic News Network and the Republic, and bless this station, Indie Rock, for having us on this program. This we pray in your Holy Son, Christ Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
RNN.